The blood on Zelda Kane's hands wouldn't wash clean, no matter how hard she scrubbed them in the tin basin, and she wondered if this was God's way of showing her what she'd always known, that she was stained beyond redemption. The crimson water swirled down the drain behind the boarding house where she worked, carrying away the physical evidence of the accident, but doing nothing for the guilt that pressed against her chest like a stone. It had been 3 weeks since the fire at the general store where she'd worked before, 3 weeks since Mrs. Henderson had died in the blaze that everyone whispered was Zelda's fault. She'd knocked over the oil lamp while reaching for a bolt of fabric on the high shelf. The flames had spread faster than anyone could have imagined, consuming the dry wooden building in minutes. Mrs. Henderson, who'd been sleeping in the back room, never made it out. Zelda stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror above the washstand, seeing the same plain face that had looked back at her for 22 years. Mousy brown hair that never held a curl, eyes the color of mud, a nose too wide and a mouth too thin. Her mother had told her before she died that Zelda would need to work twice as hard as other girls, because she didn't have beauty to recommend her. Her father had told her she was cursed before he'd abandoned her at 14, leaving her to fend for herself in a world that had little use for unmarked orphan girls with no prospects and less luck. Raton, New Mexico, in the spring of 1882, was a town built on hope and desperation in equal measure. The railroad had come through 5 years earlier, bringing commerce and opportunity, but also bringing men who sought fortunes that didn't exist, and women who sought second chances that rarely materialized. Zelda fell into the latter category, though she'd stopped believing in second chances around the same time she'd stopped believing in much of anything else. The boarding house where she now worked was run by a widow named Mrs. Carmichael, a stern woman with kind eyes who'd given Zelda a job when no one else in town would even look at her. The pay was terrible and the work was back-breaking, washing linens, scrubbing floors, cooking meals for the dozen men who rented rooms, but it was honest work and it kept her fed. Barely. "Zelda," Mrs. Carmichael's voice echoed up the back stairs. "We've got a new boarder arriving. I need you to prepare the corner room." Zelda dried her hands on her apron and hurried down the narrow staircase, her worn boots making soft thuds against the wood. The corner room was the best in the house, which meant the new boarder must be paying premium rates. She grabbed fresh linens from the supply closet and made her way to the second floor, her arms full of sheets that smelled of lye soap and sunshine. The room was already clean, she'd scrubbed it just yesterday, but she changed the bedding anyway, tucking the corners with the precision Mrs. Carmichael had taught her. She was smoothing the quilt when she heard heavy footsteps in the hallway and Mrs. Carmichael's voice, warmer than usual. "This is our finest room, Mr. Harper. You'll find it quiet and comfortable. Meals are served at 6, noon, and 6. No liquor, no gambling, no women of ill repute. Those are my rules." "Yes, madam. I'm not here for any of that." The voice was deep and steady, with an accent that suggested Texas or maybe Oklahoma territory. "I'm just here to work." Zelda kept her head down and continued smoothing the already smooth quilt, hoping to finish and slip out before the new boarder entered. But Mrs. Carmichael pushed open the door with her characteristic lack of ceremony, and Zelda found herself trapped between the bed and the window with nowhere to go. "This is Zelda Kane. She does most of the work around here, so if you need anything, you ask her. Zelda, this is Mr. Warren Harper. He'll be staying with us for the foreseeable future." Zelda forced herself to look up, preparing for the usual expressions: indifference, mild distaste, or worse, the kind of interest that made her skin crawl. But Warren Harper's face showed none of those things. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and sandy hair that curled slightly at the collar. His eyes were a startling blue, the color of the sky at midday, and they regarded her with something that looked almost like respect. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Pleased to meet you." Zelda nodded, unable to find her voice. Men didn't tip their hats to her. Men barely acknowledged her existence unless they wanted something. "Zelda, stop gaping and get back to work," Mrs. Carmichael said, but her tone lacked any real reproach. "Mr. Harper's bags need bringing up." Zelda fled the room, her heart hammering in her chest for reasons she couldn't quite name. She retrieved the 2 battered saddlebags from the front hall and carried them up the stairs, trying not to think about the way Warren Harper had looked at her. Like she was a person, like she mattered. When she returned to the corner room, he was standing by the window, looking out at the street below. He turned when she entered, and that same respectful expression crossed his face. "You can just set those anywhere," he said. "And thank you." "I appreciate the help." Zelda set the bags down by the dresser and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Mrs. Carmichael mentioned you do most of the work around here. Must keep you pretty busy." "It's honest work," Zelda said quietly, still not quite meeting his eyes. "The best kind," Warren agreed. "I'm a ranch hand myself. Been working the cattle ranches north of here, but I'm hoping to save up enough to start my own small spread someday." Zelda didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't accustomed to boarders making conversation with her, especially not about their dreams and aspirations. She mumbled something that might have been good luck and hurried from the room, feeling his eyes on her back the whole way. Over the next few days, Zelda found herself intensely aware of Warren Harper's presence in the boarding house. He was nothing like the other men who rented rooms. He kept his space tidy, never complained about the food, and always thanked her when she brought fresh water or clean towels. More than that, he spoke to her like she was a human being with thoughts and feelings, not just a servant to be ordered around or ignored. On the 4th day, she was carrying a heavy load of laundry from the line in the backyard when she stumbled on the steps. The basket went flying, and clean sheets scattered across the dirt. Zelda bit back a curse and knelt to gather them up, fighting against the tears that threatened to spill. She'd have to wash them all over again, which meant an extra hour of work she didn't have time for. "Here, let me help." She looked up to find Warren crouching beside her, already gathering the fallen linens. His hands were large and calloused, the hands of a man who worked for his living, but they handled the fabric gently. "You don't have to do that," Zelda said, reaching for the sheets he'd collected. "It's my job." "Doesn't mean you can't accept help when it's offered." He stood and held out the bundle to her, but when she tried to take it, he pulled it back slightly. "Or better yet, let me carry this for you. Where does it need to go?" "The linen closet upstairs, but really, Mr. Harper, I can manage. I'm sure you can," he said, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "But my mama raised me to help when I see someone struggling, and these look heavy." Zelda led him upstairs, acutely conscious of his presence behind her. When they reached the linen closet, he waited while she sorted the sheets that were still clean from those that needed rewashing. "You work harder than anyone I've ever seen," Warren observed. "Sun up to sundown, seems like, Mrs. Carmichael pays me fair," Zelda said, though they both knew this wasn't quite true. "I'm grateful for the work." "Grateful," Warren repeated, as if testing the word. "Seems to me you could be grateful and still acknowledge when you're being run ragged." Zelda didn't know how to respond to that. She finished sorting the sheets and closed the closet door, turning to find Warren watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Harper. I should get back to work." "Call me Warren," he said. "Mr. Harper makes me feel like my father." Over the following weeks, a pattern developed. Warren would appear whenever Zelda was struggling with some particularly heavy or difficult task, offering assistance with a quiet courtesy that never felt like pity. He carried water buckets, reached items from high shelves, and once even helped her move a wardrobe that Mrs. Carmichael wanted relocated. He asked questions about her life, not prying, just interested, and actually listened to her answers. Zelda found herself looking forward to these brief interactions, even as a voice in her head warned her not to get attached. Men like Warren Harper didn't end up with women like her. He was handsome and kind and had dreams of owning his own ranch. She was plain and cursed and carried the weight of Mrs. Henderson's death on her shoulders. It was only a matter of time before he realized what everyone else in town already knew: that Zelda Kane brought nothing but bad luck to anyone who got close to her. The first test of this came on a Wednesday morning in late April. Zelda was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the boarders, when one of the other residents, a mean-spirited prospector named Coyle, started in on her. "Heard you killed that Henderson woman," Coyle said, loud enough for everyone in the dining room to hear. "Burned her alive in that fire you started." Zelda's hands froze on the pan of biscuits she was removing from the oven. Her face burned hotter than the stove. "It was an accident," she said quietly, not turning around. "That's what you say," Coyle continued. "But seems to me a person who's that careless with other people's lives shouldn't be trusted around decent folks." "That's enough," Warren's voice cut through the room like a blade. "The lady said it was an accident, and unless you were there, I'd suggest you keep your opinions to yourself." "Lady," Coyle laughed. "That's rich. Everyone knows Zelda Kane ain't nothing but bad luck in a worn-out dress." The sound of a chair scraping back echoed through the suddenly silent room. Zelda turned to see Warren standing, his posture rigid and his jaw tight. "I said that's enough," Warren repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Apologize to Miss Kane or take your breakfast somewhere else." Coyle looked between Warren and Zelda, seeming to weigh his options. Finally, he grabbed his plate and stalked out of the dining room, muttering under his breath. The other boarders returned to their meals, and the normal sounds of breakfast resumed. Warren caught Zelda's eye and nodded slightly before sitting back down. She turned back to the stove, her hands shaking and her throat tight with emotions she couldn't name. No one had ever defended her before. No one had ever called her Miss Kane with such respect in their voice. After breakfast, when she was clearing the dishes, Warren approached the kitchen door. "I hope I didn't overstep," he said, "but I couldn't sit there and let him talk to you that way." "You didn't have to do that," Zelda said, staring at the plate in her hands. "What he said, it's all true. I did start that fire. Mrs. Henderson did die because of me." "Accidents happen," Warren said firmly. "Doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't mean you deserve to be treated with disrespect." Zelda finally looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of the judgment she'd grown so accustomed to. But all she saw was sincerity and something else, something that made her chest feel tight and warm at the same time. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. Warren was quiet for a moment, as if considering his answer carefully. "Because you deserve kindness," he said finally. "And because I see how hard you work, how you keep your head down and do your best despite the fact that most folks in this town treat you like you're invisible. That takes strength, Miss Kane. More than most people have." He left before she could respond, leaving Zelda standing in the kitchen with tears streaming down her face. They were the first tears she'd cried since the fire, and once they started, they were hard to stop. That evening, after the dinner dishes were washed and put away, Zelda sat on the back steps of the boarding house, watching the sun paint the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and pink. She heard the door open behind her and knew without looking that it was Warren. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She shook her head and he settled on the step beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade from the sky. "I lost someone once," Warren said eventually. "My younger brother, Jesse. He was 14, and we were working a cattle drive-up in Colorado Territory. There was a stampede, and Jesse got thrown from his horse. By the time we got the herd under control and went back for him." He paused, his jaw working. He was gone. Zelda turned to look at him, seeing the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. "I blamed myself for years," Warren continued. "I was older, more experienced. I should have kept him safer, should have made sure he was ready for that drive. My father told me it wasn't my fault, that accidents happen on cattle drives, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed him somehow." "How did you stop blaming yourself?" Zelda asked softly. "I'm not sure I ever completely did," Warren admitted. "But eventually, I realized that holding on to that guilt wasn't honoring Jesse's memory. He wouldn't have wanted me to spend my life beating myself up over something I couldn't control. So, I decided to try to be the kind of man he'd be proud of instead. Someone who helps people when they need it, who stands up for folks who can't stand up for themselves." Zelda understood what he was telling her, and why. "Mrs. Henderson wouldn't have wanted me to carry this guilt either," she said. "She was a kind woman. But knowing that and feeling it are two different things." "That's true," Warren agreed. "But maybe you could start by being a little kinder to yourself. Stop thinking of yourself as cursed or unlucky or whatever it is you tell yourself when you look in the mirror. Because from where I'm sitting, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met." Zelda's breath caught in her throat. "You don't even know me." "Then let me," Warren said, turning to face her fully. "Let me know you, Zelda Kane. Have dinner with me tomorrow night, not here, somewhere else. There's a little restaurant over on 2nd Street that's supposed to have decent food." "Are you asking to court me?" Zelda asked, the words barely above a whisper. "I suppose I am," Warren said, a slight smile playing at his lips. "If you'll have me." Zelda wanted to say yes more than she'd wanted anything in a long time, but the fear was overwhelming. "I'll only disappoint you," she said. I'm not enough, Warren. I'm not pretty or accomplished or lucky. I don't have anything to offer someone like you." Warren reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough against her smaller, work-worn fingers. "You're wrong," he said, his blue eyes intense. "You're more than enough, Zelda. You're kind and hardworking and strong. You're honest and brave, and you keep going even when life knocks you down. That's more than most people can say." "You barely know me," Zelda repeated, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "So give me the chance to know you better," Warren said. "One dinner. If you have a terrible time, I won't ask again. But I think you might be surprised." Zelda looked down at their joined hands, at the way his large, capable fingers wrapped gently around hers. She thought about the loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long, and the small, fragile hope that had begun to bloom in her chest since Warren Harper had arrived at the boarding house. "All right," she said finally. "One dinner." The smile that broke across Warren's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Tomorrow at 6?" he asked. Zelda nodded, already half regretting her decision but unable to take it back. After Warren went inside, she sat on the steps for a long time, holding the hand he'd touched and wondering if maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to have something good in her life after all. The next day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Zelda went about her usual duties, making beds, washing dishes, sweeping floors, but her mind was elsewhere. She had nothing suitable to wear to dinner, nothing that wasn't stained or patched or worn thin from constant use. Finally, Mrs. Carmichael noticed her distress. "What's got you so worked up?" the older woman asked, finding Zelda staring at her meager wardrobe in the tiny room she occupied on the third floor. "Mr. Harper asked me to dinner," Zelda admitted, "but I don't have anything decent to wear." Mrs. Carmichael studied her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she disappeared, returning a few minutes later with a dress draped over her arm. "This was my daughter's," she said, holding up a simple but well-made dress in a deep blue color. "She married a few years back and moved to Denver, left some of her things behind. You're about the same size." "Mrs. Carmichael, I couldn't," Zelda started, but the older woman cut her off. "You can and you will," she said firmly. "Warren Harper is a good man and you deserve a chance at happiness. Don't argue with me." Zelda took the dress with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. "Just don't let it interfere with your work," Mrs. Carmichael said, but there was a softness in her eyes that belied her stern words. "And Zelda, you're a good girl. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." That evening, Zelda put on the blue dress and attempted to do something with her hair, pulling it back from her face and pinning it as neatly as she could manage. She didn't look beautiful, she was still too plain for that, but she looked presentable, at least. When she came down the stairs, Warren was waiting in the front hall, and the expression on his face made her feel almost pretty. "You look lovely," he said, offering his arm. The restaurant on 2nd Street was small and cozy, with checkered tablecloths and oil lamps casting warm light over the half-dozen tables. Warren held her chair and ordered for both of them, consulting her preferences first. When the food arrived, beef stew and fresh bread, Zelda found she was too nervous to eat much. "Tell me about growing up," Warren said, seeming to sense her discomfort and trying to put her at ease. "Where are you from originally?" "Here, mostly," Zelda said, tearing a piece of bread into small pieces. "My parents came to Raton when I was young, looking for a fresh start. My mother died when I was 12, consumption. My father left 2 years later. Said I reminded him too much of her, and besides, he had gambling debts he needed to escape." "I'm sorry," Warren said, and she could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. "That must have been hard." "I managed," Zelda said, though the word felt inadequate for those years of struggle and uncertainty. "Mrs. Carmichael gave me work, and I've been there ever since. It's not much, but it's more than a lot of people have." "You always do that," Warren observed gently. "Minimize your own struggles. Make it sound like you should be grateful for things that most people would consider the bare minimum." Zelda looked up at him, startled. "I am grateful. I could have ended up much worse." "Maybe," Warren allowed, "but you could also have ended up much better, and you deserve that just as much. Maybe more." They talked through the meal, and gradually, Zelda began to relax. Warren was easy to talk to, asking thoughtful questions and actually listening to her answers. He told her about growing up on his family's small ranch in Texas, about his mother who died giving birth to his youngest sister, about his father who'd worked himself into an early grave trying to keep the ranch afloat. He talked about Jesse and the guilt he still carried, about his dreams of having his own spread someday where he could build something lasting. "You have dreams, Zelda?" Warren asked as they finished their meal. "Things you want for yourself?" No one had ever asked her that before. Zelda sat quietly, thinking about it. "I suppose I just want to feel like I belong somewhere," she said finally. "Like I'm not just taking up space or causing problems. Like maybe I have a right to be here." Warren reached across the table and took her hand again, just as he had the night before. "You do have a right to be here," he said firmly. "You have just as much right as anyone else to take up space, to have dreams, to be happy." Zelda wanted to believe him. Looking into his earnest blue eyes, she almost could. They walked back to the boarding house slowly, taking the long way through the quiet streets of Raton. The spring air was cool and pleasant, and overhead, stars spilled across the sky in a glittering cascade. "I had a nice time tonight," Zelda said when they reached the front steps. "Does that mean you'll let me take you to dinner again?" Warren asked. Zelda hesitated, the old fears rising up. "Warren, I don't want to mislead you. I'm not. I don't have much to offer. You should be courting someone prettier, someone with better prospects." "Stop," Warren said, not unkindly. "Stop telling me what I should want. I know what I want, and that's to spend more time with you. Unless you don't want that." "I do want that," Zelda admitted. "I just don't understand why you'd want it too." "Because you're interesting and strong and kind," Warren said. "Because you make me want to be better. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I've found something I didn't even know I was looking for." Zelda's breath caught in her throat. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm scared I'll mess this up somehow, that I'll hurt you or disappoint you or—" "You won't," Warren said with such certainty that she almost believed him. "But even if you did, even if this doesn't work out the way we hope, wouldn't you rather have tried than spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been?" He had a point. Zelda had spent so much of her life playing it safe, keeping her head down, expecting nothing and being grateful for scraps. Maybe it was time to take a risk. "All right," she said. "Let's try this. Whatever this is." Warren's answering smile was brilliant. "Whatever this is," he agreed. Over the following weeks, Warren courted Zelda with a patient persistence that slowly wore down her defenses. He took her on walks through town, ignoring the stares and whispers of the townspeople who couldn't understand what someone like him was doing with someone like her. He brought her wildflowers picked from the meadows outside town, simple bouquets that she kept in a jar on her windowsill until the petals fell. He helped her with her work whenever he could, making her laugh with stories about the various ranches where he'd worked and the colorful characters he'd encountered. But more than any of that, he listened to her. Really listened, as if her thoughts and opinions and experiences mattered. He asked about her day, her feelings, her hopes. He noticed when she was tired or sad and offered comfort without judgment. He saw her not the plain, unlucky girl everyone else saw, but someone worth knowing, worth caring about. Zelda found herself beginning to believe, just a little, that maybe she wasn't as worthless as she'd always thought. Maybe Warren saw something in her that was actually there, not just something he'd imagined or projected. Maybe she was, as he kept insisting, enough. But old fears died hard, and Zelda's sense of inadequacy had been cultivated over many years. Every time Warren did something kind, every time he looked at her with warmth in his eyes, a voice in her head whispered that it couldn't last. That eventually, he'd wake up and realize he'd made a mistake. That she'd do something to prove she was the cursed, unlucky creature everyone said she was. The test came in early May, about 6 weeks after their first dinner together. Warren had been away for a few days, helping with a large cattle drive that was passing through the area. When he returned, Zelda was so relieved to see him that she rushed through her work, eager for a few minutes of conversation before she had to start preparing dinner. She was carrying a stack of clean dishes from the kitchen to the dining room when she saw him coming through the front door. Her face lit up, and she hurried forward too fast, too eager. Her foot caught on the edge of the rug, and she went down hard, the dishes flying from her hands and shattering across the floor with a crash that seemed to echo through the entire house. Zelda lay there for a moment, stunned, before the pain in her knee and the humiliation of what she'd done crashed over her. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the blood seeping through her torn stocking, and began frantically gathering up the broken pieces. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I'll replace them, I'll work extra hours, I'm sorry. Zelda, stop, Warren said, kneeling beside her and catching her hands. You're bleeding. The dishes don't matter. They do matter, Zelda insisted, tears streaming down her face. Those were Mrs. Carmichael's good dishes, and I broke them because I was careless, because I'm always careless, because I ruin everything. You don't ruin everything, Warren said firmly, his hands tightening on hers. You had an accident, that's all. It's not the end of the world. You don't understand, Zelda sobbed. This is what I do. I break things, I hurt people, I killed Mrs. Henderson. No, Warren said, his voice sharp now. No, Zelda, that's not true. You made a mistake, yes, but you didn't kill anyone. Mrs. Henderson's death was a terrible tragedy, but it wasn't murder. It wasn't even negligence. It was an accident, pure and simple. Mrs. Carmichael appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene. Zelda braced herself for anger, for dismissal, for confirmation of every terrible thing she believed about herself. But Mrs. Carmichael just sighed and shook her head. Leave the dishes, Zelda. Go upstairs and tend to that knee. Warren, help her up. But the mess, Zelda started. We'll still be here in 10 minutes, Mrs. Carmichael said. Go on now. Warren helped Zelda to her feet and supported her up the stairs to her small room. He sat her on the narrow bed and examined her knee, which was scraped and bruised but not seriously injured. You have any clean bandages? He asked. Zelda pointed to a small trunk in the corner, and Warren retrieved the medical supplies she kept there. He cleaned her knee gently, his touch careful and precise. I'm sorry, Zelda said quietly, staring at the wall. I ruined your homecoming. You didn't ruin anything, Warren said, wrapping a clean bandage around her knee. I was happy to see you. I'm still happy to see you, even though I'm a disaster. Warren finished with the bandage and sat back, looking up at her with those steady blue eyes. Zelda, do you know what I thought about while I was on that cattle drive? I thought about you. About your smile, about the way you concentrate when you're trying to balance too many things at once, about the little furrow you get between your eyebrows when you're worried. I thought about how much I was looking forward to seeing you again. But why? Zelda asked, the question that had been haunting her for weeks finally breaking free. Why do you care about me? What could you possibly see in me that makes any of this worth it? Warren was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Can I tell you what I see when I look at you? He asked finally. Zelda nodded, unable to speak. I see a woman who's survived things that would have broken most people, Warren said. I see someone who works harder than anyone else I know and never complains. I see kindness and strength and resilience. I see someone who's been told her whole life that she's not good enough, not pretty enough, not lucky enough, and yet she keeps getting up every morning and trying her best anyway. That takes courage, Zelda, more courage than I think you realize you have. I don't feel courageous, Zelda whispered. I feel scared all the time. Being scared doesn't mean you're not courageous, Warren said. It means you're human. And maybe it's time you started treating yourself like someone who deserves kindness and patience and understanding, especially from yourself. Zelda looked at him, this man who'd somehow seen past all her defenses and her carefully constructed walls, and felt something shift inside her chest. It wasn't that she suddenly believed everything he said, but maybe she wanted to believe it. Maybe that was a start. I don't know how to do that, she admitted. I don't know how to stop seeing myself as broken. Then let me help you, Warren said. Let me show you what I see until maybe someday you can see it too. Zelda reached out tentatively, touching his face with trembling fingers. You really mean that, don't you? This isn't just charity or pity or Warren caught her hand and pressed it against his cheek. This is me falling in love with you, Zelda Kane. Has been since about the second week I was here, if I'm being honest. I know it's fast, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I needed you to know. I needed you to understand that when I say you're enough, I mean it with everything in me." Zelda's breath caught in her throat. "You love me." "I do," Warren said simply. "I love your strength and your kindness and your determination. I love the way you take care of everyone around you, even when no one's taking care of you. I love how you keep going even when the world seems determined to knock you down. I love you, Zelda, and I think I could spend the rest of my life showing you that you're more than enough and never run out of reasons why." Tears spilled down Zelda's cheeks, but for once they weren't tears of fear or shame or grief. They were tears of hope, fragile and tentative but real. "I think I love you too," she whispered. "I'm terrified of it, but I think I do." Warren's smile was gentle. "That's all right. We can be terrified together." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, then her cheek. Then, finally, her lips. It was Zelda's first kiss, and it was everything she'd never dared to imagine, tender and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Zelda rested her forehead against Warren's and tried to memorize the moment. Whatever happened next, whatever challenges lay ahead, she wanted to remember this feeling of being cherished and valued and loved. "I should go help Mrs. Carmichael clean up the mess I made," she said eventually. "We'll go together," Warren said. "That's how this works now. We face things together." They went downstairs hand in hand, and if Mrs. Carmichael noticed, she didn't comment. Together they cleaned up the broken dishes, and Warren stayed to help Zelda prepare dinner. It was domestic and comfortable and natural, and for the first time in her life, Zelda allowed herself to imagine a future that included more moments like this. Over the next few months, Warren made good on his promise to show Zelda she was more than enough. He did it in 1,000 small ways that gradually rewrote the story she'd been telling herself for so long. When she burned the bread one morning because she was distracted, he ate it anyway and told her it added character. When she spilled coffee on one of the other boarders' shirts and panicked, he reminded her that shirts could be washed and mistakes could be forgiven. When she worked herself to exhaustion and snapped at him out of frustration, he held her while she cried and told her that being tired and overwhelmed didn't make her a bad person. He brought her books from the general store and read to her in the evenings when her work was done. He taught her to play checkers and didn't get frustrated when she made foolish moves. He took her on picnics outside of town, spreading a blanket in the shade and encouraging her to just rest, to just be, without feeling like she had to earn her place in the world through constant labor. He introduced her to his friends, other ranch hands and cowboys who treated her with the same respect Warren did. He held her hand in public, uncaring of the stares and whispers. He told her she was beautiful when she was sure she looked her worst, and he meant it so sincerely that she almost believed him. But perhaps most importantly, he was patient with her fears and her doubts. Because despite everything Warren did, despite all the evidence he provided that he truly did love her and value her, there were still days when Zelda woke up convinced it was all a mistake. Days when the old voices in her head were louder than Warren's reassurances, when she was certain that she was about to do something to prove she didn't deserve the happiness she'd found. One such day came in late July. Warren had been talking about his plans for his future ranch, describing the little house he hoped to build and the cattle he wanted to raise. He talked about it with such enthusiasm and hope, and Zelda had listened with a growing sense of dread. Because Warren's dreams were big and beautiful, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was going to somehow ruin them. That evening, after dinner was cleaned up and the boarders had retired to their rooms, Zelda found Warren on the front porch. He was whittling a piece of wood, his hands moving with practiced ease. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice tight. Warren looked up, immediately setting aside his project. "What's wrong?" Zelda sat down beside him, her hands twisting in her lap. "I've been thinking about your ranch, about your plans for the future." "And," Warren prompted gently. "And I think maybe you should pursue them without me," Zelda said, the words coming out in a rush. "You have these big dreams, Warren, and you deserve to achieve them. But if I'm with you, I'll only hold you back. I'll make mistakes, I'll cause problems. I'll stop," Warren said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Zelda, we've been through this. You're not cursed, you're not unlucky, and you're not going to ruin my dreams. If anything, you're making them better." "How can you say that?" Zelda asked, tears threatening. "I'm nobody, Warren. I have nothing to bring to a marriage, no dowry, no family, no skills beyond cooking and cleaning. First of all, cooking and cleaning are valuable skills," Warren interrupted. "Second, you're bringing yourself, and that's more than enough. But third, and most important, when did I mention marriage?" Zelda froze. "You've been talking about your future ranch, about building a house, and you assumed I was planning to ask you to marry me." Zelda felt her face flush with humiliation. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have presumed. Zelda Kane, you're the most frustrating woman I've ever met," Warren said, but there was affection in his voice. "I've been talking about my future ranch, yes. Our future ranch, if you'd let me finish explaining my plans. And yes, I've been thinking about marriage, but I was waiting for the right moment to ask. I didn't realize I needed to reassure you that I still wanted to marry you before I'd even proposed." Zelda stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "You want to marry me?" "Of course I want to marry you," Warren said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Zelda, I've been courting you for 4 months. I tell you I love you every single day. I've introduced you to my friends as my future wife. What did you think this was?" "I thought it was temporary," Zelda admitted in a small voice. "I thought eventually you'd realize you could do better and move on to someone more suitable." Warren took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me very carefully," he said. "You are not temporary. You are not second best. You are not a placeholder until something better comes along. You are the woman I love, the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with, the woman I want to build a future with. Do you understand?" Zelda nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "But I need you to understand something else," Warren continued, his thumbs brushing away the tears that spilled down her cheeks. "I can tell you every day for the rest of our lives that you're enough, that you're more than enough. But until you start believing it yourself, you're always going to be waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're always going to be looking for proof that you're as worthless as you think you are." "I don't know how to stop," Zelda whispered. "I've believed it for so long." "I know," Warren said gently. "And I'm not saying it's easy, but Zelda, you have to try. You have to start treating yourself with the same kindness and patience you show everyone else. You have to start believing that you deserve good things, that you're worthy of love and happiness." "What if I can't?" Zelda asked. "What if I'm too broken?" "You're not broken," Warren said firmly. "You're hurt, and that's different. Hurt can heal if you let it. And I'll be here, helping you through it for as long as you'll have me." Zelda looked into his eyes, saw the love and certainty there, and felt something loosen in her chest. "I want to believe you," she said. "I want to so badly." "Then start small," Warren suggested. "Start by believing that right now, in this moment, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, that you're safe and you're cared for and you're enough." Zelda took a deep breath, trying to absorb his words. "All right," she said. "I can try." "That's all I ask," Warren said, pulling her close. She rested her head on his shoulder and tried to believe that this was real, that it would last, that she truly was enough. They sat there for a long time, watching the stars come out over Rattan, and Zelda allowed herself to feel the first stirrings of real hope. In August, Warren started taking on extra work, saving every penny he could toward his dream of buying land for a ranch. He was gone more often, sometimes for days at a time, and Zelda found that the separations were harder than she'd expected. She missed him constantly, worried about him when he was away, and counted the hours until his return. Mrs. Carmichael noticed the change in her. "You love him," she said one afternoon when she found Zelda staring out the window instead of working. "I do," Zelda admitted. "More than I thought it was possible to love someone. And you're still convinced you're not good enough for him." Zelda was quiet for a moment. "I'm trying not to think that way," she said finally. "Warren wants me to believe I'm enough, and I'm trying, but it's hard." "Love usually is, Mrs. Carmichael said. "Especially when you've spent most of your life believing you don't deserve it. But Zelda, that young man looks at you like you hung the moon. Whatever doubts you're carrying, he doesn't share them." "I know," Zelda said. "I just wish I could see myself the way he sees me." "Give it time," Mrs. Carmichael advised. "And in the meantime, try to enjoy what you have. Life is uncertain enough without borrowing trouble." Zelda took the advice to heart. When Warren returned from his work trips, she tried to focus on the joy of being with him rather than her fears about losing him. They spent their evenings together, talking about their plans for the future. Warren had found a piece of land about 10 miles outside of Raton that he thought would be perfect for a small ranch. It had good water access, decent grazing, and was affordable if he could save enough for the down payment by the end of the year. "I want you to see it before I make an offer," Warren said one evening. "I want to make sure you like it too." "Why does it matter if I like it?" Zelda asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "Because it's going to be your home too," Warren said. "If you'll have me, that is." "I know I haven't asked properly, but Zelda, I want to marry you. I want to build that ranch house with an extra bedroom for all the children I hope we'll have someday. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to prove to you every single day that you're more than enough, that you're everything." Zelda felt her eyes fill with tears. "You're sure? You're really sure you want that with me?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Warren said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "It was my mother's. It's not fancy, but it's all I have right now. When I have more saved, I'll buy you something nicer. It's perfect," Zelda interrupted, staring at the ring. "It's more than I ever dreamed of having." Warren took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too large, but he promised to have it sized properly. "So is that a yes?" he asked, a slight tremor in his voice that told Zelda he'd been more nervous than he'd let on. "Yes," Zelda said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Warren Harper, I'll marry you." Warren pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that took her breath away. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you," Warren said. "I love you so much, Zelda." "I love you too," Zelda replied, and for the first time she said it without that underlying current of fear. She loved him and he loved her, and maybe that really was enough. They were married in September, in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of town. Mrs. Carmichael stood up with Zelda, and one of Warren's fellow ranch hands served as his best man. The pastor who performed the ceremony had known Zelda since she was a child, and she could see the surprise in his eyes that someone had actually wanted to marry her. But he kept his thoughts to himself and pronounced them husband and wife with appropriate solemnity. The townspeople who'd shunned Zelda for so long came to the wedding, drawn by curiosity more than goodwill. But Zelda found she didn't care what they thought anymore. She had Warren, who looked at her like she was precious, and that was all that mattered. They spent their wedding night in Warren's room at the boarding house, since they didn't yet have a home of their own. It was awkward and tender and imperfect, and Zelda had never been happier. Warren was gentle and patient, taking his time to make sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Warren traced idle patterns on her shoulder. "You know what I love most about you?" he asked. "What?" Zelda murmured, half asleep. "Your heart," Warren said. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met. You care so deeply about everything and everyone, even when they don't deserve it, even when it hurts you." Zelda was quiet, thinking about that. She'd never considered her capacity for caring to be a virtue. If anything, she'd always thought it made her weak, made her vulnerable. "You say that like it's a good thing," she said. "It is a good thing," Warren insisted. "Caring about people, being kind even when the world hasn't been kind to you, that takes strength, Zelda. That's what I saw in you from the beginning, even before I knew your story. You're strong and you're brave and you're good, and every day I get to be your husband is a day I'm grateful for." Zelda turned in his arms so she could see his face. "Do you really mean that?" "Every word," Warren said solemnly. "And I'm going to keep saying it until you believe me." "I'm starting to," Zelda admitted. "Starting to believe that maybe I'm not as worthless as I always thought, that maybe you're right about me." "I am right about you," Warren said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "And someday you'll see yourself the way I see you. I promise." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in her life, Zelda didn't wake up in the middle of the night convinced that something terrible was about to happen. She slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and wanted and chosen. The next few months were busy ones. Warren continued working to save money for the ranch, and Zelda kept her position at the boarding house, wanting to contribute to their savings. Mrs. Carmichael raised her wages and gave her fewer hours, insisting that a new bride should have time to spend with her husband. In November, Warren made the down payment on the land he'd been eyeing. They spent their Sundays out at the property, planning where the house would go, where they'd build the barn, where they'd dig the well. Warren did most of the talking, sketching out his vision, but he always checked with Zelda, making sure she agreed with his plans. "I want the house to face east," Zelda said one afternoon, "so we can watch the sunrise from the porch." "East it is," Warren agreed, adjusting his sketch. "And we'll put a big window in the kitchen so you'll have plenty of light for cooking." "I want a garden too," Zelda added, warming to the planning. "Nothing fancy, just vegetables and maybe some herbs." "We'll put it on the south side of the house," Warren said. "Best sun exposure, and Zelda, I'm proud of you." She looked up, startled. "Why?" "Because you're planning for the future without constantly worrying that something's going to go wrong," Warren said. "You're letting yourself imagine good things without waiting for disaster to strike." Zelda considered this and realized he was right. She was excited about their future, genuinely excited without that constant undercurrent of dread. It was a new feeling and she liked it. "You did that," she said. "You made me believe that good things are possible." "No," Warren corrected gently. "I just reminded you of something you'd forgotten. You always had it in you, Zelda. You just needed someone to help you see it." They broke ground on the house in December, working whenever Warren had time off from the ranch where he was still employed. It was slow going, especially with winter setting in, but they were making progress. Warren did most of the heavy labor, but Zelda helped where she could, and they worked together in a companionable rhythm that felt right. One cold afternoon in late December, they were taking a break from building when Zelda said something that had been on her mind for weeks. "I forgive myself," she said quietly. Warren looked up from the sandwich he was eating. "For what?" "For Mrs. Henderson," Zelda clarified. "For the fire. I know it was an accident, and I know she wouldn't have wanted me to carry this guilt forever, so I'm letting it go. I'm forgiving myself." Warren set down his food and pulled Zelda into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That takes real courage." "I learned from the best," Zelda said, holding him just as tightly. "You taught me that I'm allowed to make mistakes without being defined by them, that I'm allowed to be human." "You taught yourself that," Warren said. "I just helped you remember." They held each other for a long time, and Zelda felt the last heavy weight of guilt and shame lift from her shoulders. She wasn't perfect, and she never would be. But she was enough. She was more than enough, and she was finally beginning to believe it. The house was finished by March of 1883, just in time for their first wedding anniversary. It was small but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a front room that served as both dining and living space. Warren had built everything with care, and Zelda had sewn curtains and cushions to make it feel like home. On the day they moved in, Warren carried Zelda over the threshold, both of them laughing at the unnecessary formality. They spent the afternoon arranging their few possessions and christening each room with kisses that made them both blush. That evening, they sat on their new porch and watched the sun set over their land. Warren had his arm around Zelda, and she leaned into his warmth, feeling more content than she'd ever imagined possible. "Are you happy?" Warren asked. "So happy," Zelda said. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." "Good," Warren said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Because you deserve to be happy, Zelda Harper. You deserve every good thing this life has to offer." Zelda turned to look at him, this man who'd loved her when she couldn't love herself, who'd seen value in her when everyone else saw nothing. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," she said. "You showed me that I was worthy of love, that I wasn't cursed or unlucky or any of the terrible things I thought about myself." "You were always worthy," Warren said. "I just helped you see it. But Zelda, you need to know something. You're the one who did the real work. You're the one who chose to believe, who chose to try, who chose to let go of all that hurt and guilt you'd been carrying. I'm proud of you for that." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For seeing me, for choosing me, for proving every day that I'm more than enough." "It's been my pleasure," Warren said, "and I plan to keep proving it for the rest of our lives." By the summer of 1883, the ranch was thriving. Warren had bought a small herd of cattle and was building a reputation as a reliable rancher. Zelda kept the house and tended her garden, which was producing more vegetables than the 2 of them could eat. She started selling the extra produce in town, adding to their income and slowly rebuilding relationships with the townspeople who'd shunned her after the fire. It wasn't always easy. There were still people who looked at her with suspicion or disdain, who whispered behind their hands when she walked by. But Zelda found that their opinions didn't hurt the way they used to. She had Warren, who loved her unconditionally. She had a home of her own, a life she was proud of. What strangers thought of her mattered less and less. In August, Zelda realized she was pregnant. She waited a few weeks to be sure before telling Warren, nervous about his reaction despite knowing logically that he'd be thrilled. When she finally worked up the courage to tell him over dinner one evening, his face split into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. "Really?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "We're going to have a baby, in March, I think," Zelda said, watching his face carefully. "Are you happy?" "Happy." Warren came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "Zelda, I'm ecstatic. This is everything I wanted. A home, a ranch, a wife I adore, and now a child. It's perfect." Zelda let herself relax into his embrace, allowing his joy to wash over her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if I'm not a good mother? What if I mess it up somehow?" "You're going to be an amazing mother," Warren said with absolute certainty. "You're kind and patient and loving. Our child is lucky to have you. How do you always know the right thing to say?" Zelda asked, half laughing through her tears. "Because I know you," Warren said simply. "I know your heart and I know your strength. You're going to be wonderful at this, just like you're wonderful at everything else you put your mind to." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Zelda tired more quickly and had to adjust her work accordingly. Warren was attentive and protective, sometimes overly so, but Zelda found his concern endearing rather than annoying. He built a cradle during the long winter evenings, working by lamplight while Zelda sewed tiny clothes from fabric Mrs. Carmichael had given her. They talked about names, about their hopes and dreams for their child, about the life they wanted to build. Warren wanted several children, a house full of noise and laughter. Zelda had never dared to imagine having even one child, but now she found herself hoping for the same thing. A family of her own, people who loved her and needed her and chose her every day. Their son was born on a cold March morning in 1884. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Zelda was certain she wouldn't survive it. But Warren was there the whole time, holding her hand and telling her she could do it, that she was strong, that their baby needed her to keep fighting. When the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Zelda looked down at his red, wrinkled face and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. This was her son, hers and Warren's, a life they'd created together. He was perfect. "What should we name him?" Warren asked, his voice hoarse with emotion as he looked at his son for the first time. "I was thinking James," Zelda said. "After your brother Jesse, not the same name exactly but close enough to honor his memory." Warren's eyes filled with tears. "James Harper," he said, trying out the name. "I love it. Jesse would have loved it too." They spent the next few days in a haze of exhaustion and wonder, learning how to care for their newborn son. James was a good baby, healthy and strong, and Zelda found that motherhood came more naturally than she'd expected. She still had moments of doubt, times when she worried she was doing everything wrong, but Warren was always there to reassure her. "Look at him," Warren said one night, watching Zelda nurse their son. "He's content and growing, and that's because of you. You're giving him everything he needs." "We're giving him everything he needs," Zelda corrected. "I couldn't do this without you, Warren." "We're a team," Warren agreed. "Always have been, always will be." As James grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Warren expanded their herd, built additional outbuildings, and hired a young ranch hand to help with the work. Zelda's garden grew larger each year, and she started preserving and selling her produce at the general store in town. Money was still tight, but they were making it work, building something solid and lasting. In the spring of 1886, Zelda gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose. She had Zelda's brown hair and Warren's blue eyes, and from the moment she could talk, she had opinions about everything. James adored his baby sister, bringing her toys and singing to her when she cried. Watching Warren with their children, Zelda sometimes felt overwhelmed by how much her life had changed. 4 years ago, she'd been convinced she was cursed, that she'd never deserve love or happiness or a family of her own. Now she had all of those things and more. She had a husband who loved her, 2 beautiful children, and a home she was proud of. "What are you thinking about?" Warren asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching James chase fireflies while Rose dozed in Zelda's arms. "How grateful I am," Zelda said, "for all of this. For you, most of all. You changed my life, Warren." "We changed each other's lives," Warren said. "You gave me a reason to build something permanent, something lasting. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose beyond just surviving day to day." "I don't think I ever properly thanked you," Zelda said, turning to look at him. "For not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. For seeing something in me worth loving when I couldn't see it myself." "You don't need to thank me for that," Warren said. "Loving you has been the easiest thing I've ever done. The only hard part was convincing you to love yourself." "You did more than convince me," Zelda said. "You proved to me every single day that I was more than enough, that I was worthy and valuable and deserving of good things. You never stopped proving it, even when I was too stubborn or scared to believe you." Warren reached over and took her free hand, lacing their fingers together. "And I'll keep proving it for the rest of our lives," he said. "That's what marriage is, Zelda. It's choosing each other every day, reminding each other of our worth, building each other up when the world tries to tear us down." Zelda squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar warmth of his touch. "I love you," she said, "more than I thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," Warren said. "My brave, beautiful, strong wife who never gives herself enough credit." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the stars came out. James eventually tired of chasing fireflies and came to sit between them, leaning against Warren's shoulder. Rose stirred in Zelda's arms but didn't wake. It was a perfect moment, the kind Zelda had never dared to dream about when she was younger. "Mama," James said sleepily, "tell us a story." Zelda thought for a moment, then smiled. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a girl who didn't believe in herself. She thought she was cursed and unlucky and that she'd never deserve happiness. But then she met a cowboy who saw her differently. He saw all the good things about her that she couldn't see in herself. And slowly, day by day, he proved to her that she was worthy of love, that she was more than enough, and eventually she started to believe him. They built a life together full of love and hope and second chances, and they lived happily ever after." "Is that our story?" James asked, his eyes already closing. "Yes, sweetheart," Zelda said, smoothing his hair. "That's our story." Warren caught her eye over James's head and smiled, and Zelda smiled back. It was their story, and it had turned out better than she'd ever imagined possible. Over the next decade, their family and ranch continued to grow. They had 2 more children, twin boys born in 1889, bringing their total to 4. The ranch expanded to include more land and a larger herd, requiring Warren to hire additional help. Zelda's garden became famous in Rattan, and she started teaching other women her preservation techniques. The townspeople who'd once shunned her now sought her out for advice and friendship. The fire at the general store and Mrs. Henderson's death had faded into the past, remembered but no longer held against her. Zelda had proven herself through years of hard work and dedication, and more importantly, she'd proven to herself that she was more than her worst mistake. There were still hard days, of course. Days when the old doubts crept in, when Zelda caught herself waiting for disaster to strike. But Warren was always there to remind her of how far she'd come, of how strong she was, of how much she'd built. And increasingly, Zelda didn't need the reminders as much. She'd internalized his words, made them part of her own internal dialogue. In the summer of 1895, on their 13th wedding anniversary, Warren surprised Zelda with a gift. It was a small painting he'd commissioned from an artist passing through town. The painting showed their ranch house with the 4 children playing in the yard and Warren and Zelda standing on the porch, his arm around her shoulders. "It's beautiful," Zelda breathed, tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect." "I wanted you to have something to remember this time," Warren said. "To remember how far we've come, how much we've built together." "I could never forget," Zelda said. You changed my life, Warren. You gave me everything I thought I could never have." "No," Warren said, pulling her close. "You gave yourself those things. I just helped you see that you were capable of having them. You did the work, Zelda. You chose to heal, to grow, to believe in yourself. That was all you." Zelda looked up at him, this man who'd loved her so faithfully for 13 years, and felt the last lingering shadow of doubt dissolve. She wasn't the broken, cursed girl she'd once been. She was a wife, a mother, a successful businesswoman in her own right. She was strong and capable and worthy of love. She was more than enough. She always had been. "Thank you," she whispered, standing on her toes to kiss him, "for seeing me when I was invisible, for loving me when I couldn't love myself, for proving every single day that I was more than enough." "It was my privilege," Warren said, resting his forehead against hers. "And it will continue to be my privilege for the rest of our lives." They stood there on the porch of the home they'd built together, watching their children play in the fading light, and Zelda allowed herself to fully embrace the life she'd created. A life full of love and laughter and second chances. A life that proved, beyond any doubt, that she'd always been worthy of happiness. She just needed someone to help her see it, and Warren Harper, with his patient love and unwavering faith, had done exactly that. He'd proven every day, in 1,000 small ways, that Zelda Kane, now Zelda Harper, was more than enough. She was everything. As the years continued to pass, Warren and Zelda's love only deepened. They grew older together, their children grew up and eventually started families of their own. James became a rancher like his father, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Warren's hair turned gray. Rose married a kind schoolteacher and moved to Santa Fe, though she visited often with her own children. The twins, adventurous and restless, left to seek their fortunes in California but wrote faithfully every month through it all. Warren never stopped reminding Zelda of her worth. Even when arthritis made his hands stiff and lines creased his face, he would take her in his arms and tell her she was beautiful. Even when her hair turned silver and her body grew weary from decades of hard work, he would look at her with the same love and admiration he'd shown that first day at the boarding house. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1913, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. It was a warm September day, much like the day they'd married, and the house was full of noise and laughter and love. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Warren and Zelda sat on their porch one more time, holding hands as they'd done thousands of times before. "Did you ever imagine our life would turn out like this?" Warren asked. "Never," Zelda admitted. "When I met you, I couldn't imagine any future at all. I certainly couldn't imagine this: a family, a successful ranch, grandchildren, a lifetime of love. But you took a chance," Warren said. "You let yourself believe even when it scared you." "Because you made it safe to believe," Zelda said. "You never let me give up on myself, even when I wanted to. You saw me, really saw me, and you loved what you saw. That changed everything." "You changed everything," Warren corrected gently. "You're the one who chose to heal, to grow, to become the woman you were always meant to be. I just had the privilege of witnessing it." Zelda leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "We made a good life together, didn't we?" "The best life," Warren agreed. "Full of love and family and all the things that matter. I wouldn't change a single moment of it." "Not even the hard parts?" Zelda asked. "The lean years, the drought of '88 when Rose was so sick we thought we'd lose her." "Not even those," Warren said. "Because we faced them together and they made us stronger. They proved that we could weather any storm as long as we had each other." Zelda thought about this, about all the storms they'd weathered over 3 decades of marriage. The financial struggles, the personal losses, the moments of doubt and fear. Through it all, Warren had been her anchor, her safe harbor, her constant reminder that she was more than enough. But more than that, she'd learned to be those things for herself. She'd learned to quiet the voices that told her she was worthless, to recognize her own strength and capability, to treat herself with the same kindness she showed others. Warren had started her on that journey, but she'd walked it herself, step by step, day by day, until she'd become the woman she was now, confident, capable, and certain of her own worth. "I love you, Warren Harper," she said, lifting her head to look at him. "Thank you for a lifetime of proving that I was more than enough. Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I'd given up on myself. Thank you for showing me what love really means." "I love you too, Zelda Harper," Warren said, his blue eyes still as bright and clear as they'd been the day they met. "And I'll keep proving it to you for as long as I have breath in my body. That's my promise to you, now and always." They kissed as the stars came out over their ranch. Two people who'd found each other against all odds and built a life beyond their wildest dreams. A life that proved that love could heal old wounds, that patience could overcome fear, and that sometimes the person who believes in you most can help you learn to believe in yourself. And as the years continued to unfold, that belief remained constant. Through joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges, Warren and Zelda faced it all together, secure in the knowledge that they were exactly where they belonged in each other's arms, in the life they'd built together, proving every single day that love was enough, that they were enough, that they always had been. Their story became legend in Rattan, passed down through generations as an example of the transformative power of love. The shy, broken girl who thought she was cursed had become a pillar of the community, known for her generosity and wisdom. The cowboy who'd seen her worth when no one else did became known as a man of integrity and kindness, someone who'd built a legacy of love that extended far beyond his own family. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that Warren had understood from the beginning, and that Zelda had learned to embrace. She was more than enough. She had always been more than enough. She just needed someone to help her see it, and then the courage to believe it herself. In the end, that was the greatest gift Warren gave Zelda, not his love, though that was precious, but the ability to see herself through his eyes, to recognize her own strength, her own worth, her own beautiful, imperfect humanity. And in doing so, she'd learned to love herself as fully as Warren loved her. They lived long, full lives, surrounded by family and friends, their love story an inspiration to all who knew them. And when they finally left this world, within days of each other, as if neither could bear to be without the other for long, they left behind a legacy of love that would endure for generations. The ranch house still stood, maintained by their descendants, and on the wall hung the painting Warren had commissioned all those years ago. A reminder of what they'd built together, of how far they'd come, of the love that had sustained them through everything life threw their way. And in the hearts of everyone who'd known them, the memory remained of a cowboy who'd seen beyond appearances to the beautiful soul within, and a woman who'd learned that she was worthy of love. Their story was a testament to the power of believing in someone, of proving through actions rather than words that they matter, that they're valued, that they're more than enough. Warren Harper had proved it every day, in 1,000 small ways, until Zelda Kane Harper finally believed it herself. And in doing so, they'd created not just a life together, but a love that would echo through the ages. A reminder that sometimes the most profound transformation comes from someone simply refusing to give up on you, and teaching you not to give up on yourself. Their story ended as all good stories do, with love triumphant, with healing complete, with two souls who'd found each other against all odds and made a life worth living. A life that proved, beyond any shadow of doubt, that Zelda had always been more than enough. She just needed Warren to help her see it, and then the strength to claim it for herself. And that, in the end, was the happily ever after they both deserved.